I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Are there any public speakers, Doug?
Yes, sir. There's one public speaker, Tony Keevan.
Okay.
Hello. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Tony Keevan. I host and produce a TV show called What Really Matters NYC, and I beat up the MTA a lot. But I'm not here to do that today. I'm here to just give a suggestion. I was at the, I think I have 3 minutes, right? 2 minutes. I was at the 110th Street station. I'm not going to do that, sir. I'm going to talk about revenue because I saw in your program today declining revenues. I was at the 110th Street station in Malcolm X Boulevard this weekend, and I saw the empty wall in the subway, and so I measured it. I took 40 paces, so I said that wall is the length of the platform. I multiplied the 40 paces, pretended each one was a yard. That's 3 feet, 120 yards. I came out with 360 feet of empty space against the wall where the subways come. That's on one side going northbound, and then the other side another 360 empty feet of space. And I'm an advertising man, and I put that together, so that's about 700 feet of empty space, divided by 20 feet per poster. For an advertising person, that would be 35 posters you could put in that subway station, times nominally, let's say $10,000 a month per poster. That's very cheap. That comes to 35 posters, $10,000 a month, $350,000 a month in that station. Multiply it times 450 stations, and you've got about $157 million a month. Divide it by 2 because I'm too optimistic. You've got $78 million a month in revenue. And I just would ask if you could consider doing that, because to me it seems such a simple solution as a way to generate revenue so that we can increase our system and increase the passengers. And if you look at the AM news today, it's all about apps, apps in the subway. Just think of the power of an application. If you could put the cell phone service down in the subway of someone traveling along and in the stop, they could look at their iPhone and figure out what restaurants are upstairs. You'd make another $1 billion a month. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keevan. I believe that concludes our public speakers.
Okay, so the first order of business on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the March 22nd, 2010 Finance Committee meeting. May I please have a motion? And a second, please? Second, please. All in favor? The minutes are approved. Doug, you want to take us through the work plan,
Yeah,
please?
there's one change to the work plan. The annual pension fund report was moved from April and now will be presented next month at the May meeting.
Okay.
I believe the next item is April Budget Watch.
Yes, go ahead. Why don't you give us that?
Sure. Overall, agency results were favorable in March due to the combination of higher revenues and lower expenses. Unfortunately, unfavorable PMT receipts and real estate subsidies more than exceeded these gains. First, I'll talk about the revenue. March passenger and toll revenues were better than budget by 2.9% and 3.4% respectively. This offset unfavorable February results, which were impacted by 2 major storms. So year-to-date, we're on target. But the good news is March, that wasn't impacted by weather, was quite favorable. Moving to operating expenses, those continue to be less than budget. They're $26 million or 3.8% favorable for the month. And year-to-date, they're $83 million or 4.2% favorable. These variances reflect timing, lower energy, vacancy savings, and lower OTPS costs. Year-to-date labor expenses were $29 million less than the adopted budget, primarily due to vacancies that were partially offset by slightly higher overtime costs due to the February winter storms. Year-to-date OTPS costs were $54 million favorable. Again, and we keep saying this, agencies are making every effort to reduce non-essential spending in reaction to the lower subsidy forecast that we've been speaking about. Moving to the payroll mobility tax, we've started really comparing numbers against those revised forecasts that were developed in conjunction with discussions with DOB in January and February, where they talked about bringing down the combined 9-10 forecast by $336 million. April was not a strong month. We actually now year-to-date and those taxes are $40 million unfavorable even when compared with that new forecast. When compared with the budget, we're $180 million unfavorable year to date. We want to focus this comparison more against the forecast, and we think some of that may be timing. The first week since the cutoff of the April receipts have been pretty positive. It's been a pretty strong week, but it's not a lot of data to go by. So right now we still would say we're probably tracking along with the new forecast. I neglected to talk about debt service costs, which were $26 million or 5% favorable year to date, and that's due to lower variable rates and timing. The MTA other aid that we received as part of the bailout package, basically we get those monies on a quarterly basis, and April is not one of those months where we are expected to receive it, so we had zero and we had budgeted zero, but we're very much on target with those taxes. The other unfavorable piece of news is that the real estate taxes for the month of April keep coming in around $30 million. That's $12 million or 29% lower than projected. Year to date, we're down by about $30 million or 19% lower. And what happened there is we seem to, like I said earlier, we seem to have bottomed out at around $30 million a month, but in our budget we had expected a modest incremental month-to-month increase through the first 6 months of the year, and so far that hasn't happened. We're hopeful that will turn around shortly. Again, so we're doing okay on the operating side, but we're doing not so well with the PMT and the real estate taxes, and we'll be watching that very closely. We're developing some in-house cost reduction programs to combat that, and that's what we will be doing between now and the July financial plan. That's all I have right now.
So just so we're only 4 months in. Is this through April?
Through April on the taxes, through March on the operating results.
And we're already down another $80 million?
Well, we're down $40 million year to date against the new forecast. For the month, we had a bad month of April.
Well, no, between the PMT, the MTA aid, and the real estate taxes, we're down.
Close to it. The MTA aid, though, we know for a fact that money came in to the state coffers in the following month.
$70 million.
Yeah, yep. That's right.
And did you say that you think we're going to get some of that back, or we're still not
sure?
Well,
the only thing we know
if that trends out, I mean, how does that?
Again, we had to make all sorts of timing assumptions, looking at the calendar and looking at payroll collections statewide. And then there are lags between when it comes in and when it comes to us. So by no means was that a perfect science. But what we do know is the week that has cut off since then has been a relatively good week. You know, if we kept going along like that, we would be in pretty good shape. So again, between now and the next month, we think we'll have not a perfect handle, but a better handle than we have right now. And going into the July plan, we're going to look at all this information and reassess where we are, and consider that also with all the expense reduction programs that we're doing in-house. And
so I understand it's still too early to tell. I think that's fair. I'm just sort of astounded by the number, and I know we're supposed to be looking at our updated forecast, but it is sort of, how do you not look at what they said less than a year ago? In the PMT, we're below, did it say 55%? I mean, did I read that right? 54.4% below the adopted budget on the PMT.
Well, the adopted budget...
I understand we're not supposed to be looking at that because we made adjustments since then.
Well, the problem with the adopted budget is it also assumed that some of the 09 shortfall was going to roll.
I understand.
So you have the hit not only of less collections, but not getting that roll.
I totally get it. I guess my point, I'm just highlighting the point of how off.
Yeah.
I don't want to say we were. I would say they were. Mm-hmm. But I understand we're dealing with the new updated forecast, which is still $70 million 4 months in, is sort of scary.
Yes.
Right. But the other side of that, too, Jeff, is we don't know the extent, and we will know, obviously, by July, of what all these cuts
too early
that
to tell.
we've...
I get that.
No, on the other... No, I don't mean on the revenue side now. I'm talking about the expense side. We don't know for sure what savings completely that we are going to be able to realize. But what we think, and being on the cut committee, we all are, by July, I think we'll have a much better handle on the chairman and the cut committee's expense savings mode. So we really don't know both things. We really don't know the revenue, and we really don't know the expense, what we're going to be able to save. I mean, the chairman's asked for another $400 million expense savings, as we all know, out of the agencies, and we got to see how that all materializes. And I think that by the time we get to July, before we get to July, we're going to have a much better idea. And we'll watch it every single month. That's what we have to do. Mitch?
The concern I have, notwithstanding the revenues, which are coming in below expectations, coming in below anticipated, coming in below old forecast, new forecast, and whatever other forecast we want to come up with, is that notwithstanding all of that, there is no guarantee that even if the money is collected by the state of New York, we will ever see it. Okay? Because with what is happening in Albany at the moment, and the lack of the budget, and if you talk to some people in Albany, it may be that they will never have a 2010, 2011 budget. That may very well happen in that regard. And so we're working off of numbers that they're working off of from last year with minor adjustments. And when they go out and look to see, okay, who's got cash, they don't really care whose account it's in, because until it's here, it's theirs.
With the PMT, we would get that money under the wet-dry appropriation, where last year's budget sort of allowed. We're sort of guaranteed of getting that this year. The MMTOA, you're correct, they could do something with
that. And notwithstanding any wet-dry appropriation, that wet-dry appropriation is as good until the next legislature changes it, which they can do. Okay, and we've seen that happen. We know that happened in December. Money that was appropriated to us, all of a sudden, never came to us in that regard. So this is not I mean, I'm concerned that the problem, notwithstanding the collection numbers, may be worse than just the collection numbers.
No, you're absolutely.
The likelihood that we will ever see any of that money is very concerning.
The only thing that would counter that is the state sort of, I believe, recognized the kind of position we're in, and that's why in the most recently proposed budget, they talk about that higher, they propose that higher PMT tax situation where you would have higher collections within New York City.
Which is not going to happen.
I understand that.
Okay?
But
I don't care who says it.
I know,
it's not going to happen.
We don't think so either, but the intent at least was to try to make us whole.
You're welcome.
So, yeah.
It's not going to happen.
We don't think it's going to happen either, but the only point of what I was saying was that there was an intent on, from the state to at least acknowledge that we're short the money and hopefully get us more money one way or the other, or maybe less likely to take money down the road. But
I guess the only thing I would say about that, Doug, is it depends on how you define the word state.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the problem at the moment, is that...
But Mitch, in fairness, what we do know, we have just had, and you'll find out when Pat makes his report, we've had a very successful offering. We have adequate cash. We've made sure that we have adequate cash to operate this agency. The agency will be operated, and what Doug is saying, and I think what we're all saying, and a lot of us, including yourself, are on the cut committee. We're going to be meeting monthly. We're going to have to monitor this very carefully to see how the expense savings are coming in, which is very fluid. We don't know exactly how much we're going to be able to extract from the organization. On the other hand, the point that Jeff makes up, these taxes, we really don't know where they're going to be, and we think in the next month or two, which will give us adequate time, I believe, to be able to do what we have to do.
The other concern I have is I'm beginning to realize that somebody else's definition of the word timing doesn't relate to my definition of the word timing, because all we've been hearing since December is that don't worry, it's timing, and for some reason the time never occurs where we get it. And it just keeps getting pushed out and out and out. So I am not convinced, even in these numbers, we're ever going to get the amount of money we assume we're going to get, which is only going to make all of the other activities even more important, not less important.
Yeah, and in addition to what Mitch said, my concern is that we've updated our forecast, Now our updated forecast is falling behind what the actuals are.
Yeah.
And, the experience that we have is that we got our original forecast from the state, working with their people at Taxation and Finance. And, my experience with them in 40 years is that they've never been accurate in those projections, especially with something new. And this was something new. And it would seem to me that this would be, since this was based upon payroll, you could figure out what the payroll that was subject to Medicare.
We tried to get that information. We couldn't. We tried very hard to get that.
Yeah, that would be the basis of our tax. So trying to figure out what that should be shouldn't have been hard.
Yeah. By the way, and we're going to be taking. We actually started the process of doing an independent forecast of these taxes that should be coming out in the relatively near future. But even with that said, another month or two of data is going to be a tremendous help to us. But I understand what you're saying, and the intent of these taxes were that they should be fairly easy. They're just based on payroll, yet they've been very difficult. Yeah.
Are you really going to do an independent forecast that you rely on, or are you going to try and have the staff resources to intelligently look at the state's forecast?
I'm not sure exactly how it's going to go at this point, but we have people that are going to be looking at data. I guess it would be sort of an independent verification. I don't know to the extent it would be tracking what they're trying to do. I can get back to you on that. I don't know all the details.
It's just that, I mean, you're bound to be wrong, as the state is, perhaps differently. You're probably bound to be wrong differently in one way or another. You won't have the same number. But whether the dynamic that you're going to set up is a place you want to go
I think
as
it's more
a step for this agency and its relationship with the state, I think it's something that you might want to think about a little.
I just think it's more of a comfort level for us. I mean, if we find out something that just is in complete conflict for what, and this is all theoretical, with what we're being told, I think that's just something that we would want to know. We'll see.
Okay, does that do it on the Budget Watch?
Just one
I'm
comment.
Sorry, Noreen, go ahead.
Doug, I just would hope that we could try to persevere on those Medicaid numbers. I can't believe that
we were
they
told
are
flat out that they don't exist. We've made multiple efforts to get that. I can get to you the protocol that we followed in trying to gather that data.
It just makes no sense that it would not be available.
I don't think it's available in the level of the breakout. I think it's more available in totality, but it's my recollection. Yeah.
Okay, before we go on, does that do Budget Watch, Doug?
Yes.
Yeah. Before we get Pat and Finance Watch, I want to apologize to Bob, number one, and also to the committee. As you notice, there's a new face sitting to my left, and to me, he's not new because we've been working together, I guess, for about almost a month now already, Bob. But Bob Foran, who is our new Chief Financial Officer, and we welcome, and I'm sure the committee welcomes him as well, and we look forward to working with you, Bob, and having a successful career here at the MTA. And I know you wanted to say a few things, so please, Bob Foran, our new Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you very much. I really just want to express my appreciation to the former, to the acting Chief Financial Officer, my predecessor, Dave Moretti. Obviously, I knew I was coming in and needed to hit the ground running. Things were already in the works, and there was a lot of work going on and things that had to be done immediately. But Dave went way above the call of duty, I think, in spending time to try to make that transition work. So I really do want to express my appreciation for his selfless efforts during that time. So.
And I think that the committee, on behalf of the committee, we would also like to join in and thanking Dave for this, for the good work that he did.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, Doug, I guess.
The next item is Finance Watch, and Pat McCoy is here to take us through that.
Finance Watch is appears on page 13 of the committee book today. Two items to report on. The first being the issuance of $475 million of revenue anticipation notes. This occurred. We closed the transaction on March 31st. And again, just to refresh the committee's memory on this, the proceeds of the notes are going to be used to finance operating and maintenance expenditures of the transit and commuter systems this year. The notes mature December 31st, and we were very pleased with the results. As you can see here, the final yield was a 0.38%. With all the costs included, the all-in TIC was 0.667%. We did receive the highest ratings from all three agencies for the notes, and the transaction was led by Citigroup together with M.R. Beale and Company as a co-senior manager. Hawkins and Goldman were bond counsel and FA, respectively.
Just a quick question. The coupon was 2%, and
correct.
the yield was 0.38. Do you know what the dollar price was, just out of curiosity?
Off the top of my head, I don't. Sorry. December 31st of this year.
Are we authorized to, do we have any restrictions on issuing replacement RANs at that point if we saw fit? Never mind replacement, issuing more RANs. Yes.
To issue new RANs to pay off these RANs that would mature sometime in 2011.
You'd set up a whole new issue, presumably, with a whole new bunch of revenues to pay them off with. But
Yeah.
if you chose to do, forget it. I think the answer is we are technically authorized to do that.
Okay.
But,
I think
just coincidentally use the proceeds of the next note issue to take out these if that were the case. Or
Yeah.
maybe you wouldn't take out these. You'd pay these off and you'd issue new RANs to give yourself more cash.
Yes, we have that ability legally and authorization. So.
Okay. And just a note on ratings. Many of you may have heard that both Moody's and Fitch have recalibrated their municipal rating scale, and this resulted in a couple of rating changes. Most notably, Moody's, which had previously had us at an A3, due to that recalibration, we're now back to our prior rating of A2. Right.
Thank you.
And then, and you see the Fitch changes here to primarily to the dedicated tax fund and the state service contract, which is obviously a dormant lien at this point. And so that's the update on ratings. If there's no other questions, that concludes Finance Watch.
The next item is the proposed 2010 to 2014 MTA capital program, and Linda Kleinbaum is here.
Thank you. I have a few slides, but I'll start in the interest of keeping things moving. So you all have before you an executive summary to the capital program and a new capital program book. As you know, the submission we made in October was vetoed without prejudice with our ability to resubmit. And what we have before you is the proposed program for resubmission to CPRB. I want to talk about what's different in the program, and that is a new programmatic approach to the program to create tighter connections between project evaluations and delivery of benefits. So it's no longer enough for us to just say that a project is state of good repair, normal replacement, or system improvement. We're looking to very clearly explain what the benefit to the customer is, what the value in terms of safety and reliability is, what its ability is to save, to provide better service and increase capacity on the existing system. In addition, projects are expected now to reduce operating costs. As you know, often before, a new facility with new technologies tended to increase costs. and that's no longer going to be what's expected. If you're replacing something that's old, presumably there's a fair amount of money going into its maintenance, and something new should allow you to make appropriate reductions. So projects will have with them operating savings evaluations, and in the year that they're expected, we'll be monitoring the project to see that it gets implemented as stated, and then we'll be looking to take the operating savings. In addition, projects are expected to secure their benefits for the least cost. So we're looking at projects, and I think you heard in some of the agency committees about ways that we can either extend the useful life of a project, eliminate projects that aren't critical, replace components instead of the entire project, and also to do a project for just the basics, leaving off bells and whistles that might otherwise be nice to have but not necessary. Some examples of this new programmatic approach, which I believe you heard in the operating committees. Something we've been talking about is Transit Stations Program, which is now fix what's broken, as opposed to go in and change everything in the station. This will allow us to address more stations, and once a station has been fixed in this new programmatic way, it will go into a maintenance program to ensure that the fixes get their full useful life. I think you've heard a lot about what we're planning to do on depots, shops, and yards, particularly as it relates to Harmon, where we no longer, these are expensive investments, as you all know. It no longer serves us to look at these investments as if they need to be done for any single agency. Instead, we're looking to do investments that can be for the benefit of the entire family of agencies. So an example is Harmon, where a new strategic focus was applied. They specified the work to be done in this proposed program to be an electric shop. It allowed them to reduce the Harmon investment in this program by $125 million. They got rid of some other things they were also thinking of doing. In addition, it will have capacity to allow Long Island Railroad to have work done there, which in turn reduced a cost that Long Island was expecting to have relative to its shop that it was planning to do. So it had that double benefit. In addition, we're asking that as these things get put in place, that they get designed and implemented in a way to reduce operating costs in their implementation. Rolling stock, I think you heard in Transit's presentation, they did things to allow them to purchase fewer trains and to maximize their investment in buses. In addition, as they said, they're looking to do a procurement strategy that will allow them to reduce the unit price of cars. And for all the agencies, we're looking as we move forward to look at opportunities to buy cars that weigh less. If you do that, your cars cost less, you have less wear and tear on your track, and your energy costs go down. So that's going to be something, most of these issues will be issues we continue to deal with as the program rolls out over the 5 years. Signals, I think you heard some on CBTC signals. A lot of work has happened in CBTC internationally, and we're going to be looking to some of that work to see if there are ways to bring in these projects in a quicker time frame and for less cost. So those programmatic assumptions allowed us to save $1.8 billion from the program we submitted back in October. So instead of this being a $25.6 billion program, it's a $23.8 billion program. But in addition to these programmatic changes, there have also been some funding changes. You may remember that what we submitted in October had very aggressive federal funding assumptions. We assumed a 25% increase in federal funds based on the notion that reauth would happen in the 2010 timeframe. It did not. Consequently, we held stable federal funds for 2010 and 2011. That created a $1.76 billion reduction. This reduction, however, is being met by the programmatic savings I just talked about. However, I don't mean to leave you with the impression that funding uncertainty is now behind us. It's not clear when the next reauthorization will happen, and as you know, it's not clear about other funding for the last years of the program. So that being the case, we look to give people surety that the first 2 years of the program are what they ought to be. So we've taken, as I said, the programmatic reviews. We've evaluated every project in the first 2 years to make sure they're the right ones. And so as compared to October, there's been some movement back and forth so that the projects that need to get done in the first 2 years are the ones being done in the first 2 years. Any project funded in the first 2 years is funded to its completion, so we won't leave any project that we start unfinished. And with this kind of a look, we feel that people can have confidence that you can move forward with this program with funding in place for the first 2 years. This chart just shows you how the resubmission now compares to the original submission. As I said, there's a $1.8 billion reduction in costs for the core program. The network expansion projects continue to be funded as they were in October. In addition, something that didn't get discussed at the agency meetings are the MTA-wide security program that continues to be funded as it was in the October submission. And the security program there includes both MTA security federal grants to harden the system as well as MTA PD. And the interagency program actually is the same funding. The difference that you see here between 715 and 315 is what was discussed at the agencies. Originally, we had included positive train control, which is an investment, an unfunded mandate by FRA for the railroads. It had been included outside of the core programs. The commuter railroads have also picked those costs up. That's what explains that difference. Federal funding, funding assumptions, as I said before, the major difference here is in the change in the federal formula funds, which is the $1.8 billion reduction there. Otherwise, the assumed sources of funding for the program continue. I just want to take a few minutes to tell you what else is different about this program. In this program, we intend to create new and stronger partnerships with contractors and labor. As you've heard the chairman say, he's been told many times that we're charged a premium for MTA work. That's a function of a few things. One is that we have pretty successfully moved all the risk to contractors. You pay for risk. In addition, our scopes of work sometimes are too prescriptive, which means, again, we're buying more than we need, or they're too broad, which means you have change orders. We're looking to fix those kinds of problems and create a better partnership to do so. We're also evaluating project labor agreements. The city recently entered into a PLA, which they believe will save them hundreds of millions of dollars. So we're working to consider and evaluate the benefit of that to this program. And as we roll that thinking out, we'll be coming forward to you on that. What else is different? We're looking in this program to increase contractor diversity. As you know, we set goals with every program, and we have underperformed in relation to those goals. We know that part of the reasons for that is it's very difficult. There are barriers to our work for small and minority businesses. We have to find ways to reduce those barriers, such as bonding and insurance, the time it takes for us to make payments, the time it takes for us to approve change orders. Those are all things we have to continue to work on. One of the things we're doing in this regard to increase the pool here is the MTA Mentor Program, which is modeled after a program done by the School Construction Authority. It addresses most of these barriers and will allow new contractors to be available to the pool of MTA work. And finally, what else is different is this program will look to significantly increase transparency. Some months back, the Citizens Budget Commission issued a report that said it was very difficult to follow budgets, schedules, scopes for projects according to the blue pages, the list of projects that we put out. So we're going to put on the web an online dashboard that will allow the public to track budgets, schedules, and scopes. So if you're riding in the system and you see some work as you're going through, there'll be a map. You can click on where you were, find out what the project is, drill in, understand what changes have happened to its budget, scope, and schedule. If a project is on goal, it'll be coded green. If it's failing to meet its goals, it'll be coded red. So that will go up when this program is approved. And in addition, for those of you who've been at CPOC, you know we're trying to use CPOC differently. We're bringing both changes in strategic direction through CPOC as well as discussions of problem projects or issues to CPOC. And that is the basis of the difference for the program before you. We're asking for its approval to move on to the board and then to be issued to CPRB, the part of the program that requires their approval. At that point, they have a 30-day clock on which to consider the program.
Okay, are there any comments by any of the members? Jim, you want to move it or move it? Okay, we have a motion and a second, please, and a vote, please. All in favor? Everybody? Okay. You got it. Send it on to the board. Doug?
Okay. Next, we turn to MTA headquarters and all agency items. There's one information item. Pat will provide us with a presentation on the review of variable rate debt.
This presentation is in your committee book. It begins on page 23 of the book. This is our annual brief report to the Finance Committee on the variable rate portfolio. We begin by just restating what our unhedged variable rate debt policy is, and that is to have no more than 25% of our aggregate principal amount of debt outstanding in unhedged variable rate mode. And as you'll see, we're currently well below that. We have essentially two core types of variable rate debt in our portfolio, discussed here on page 25, variable rate demand obligations, or VRDOs, and auction rate securities. Variable rate demand bonds reset either daily or weekly, and they typically have a letter of credit backing them from a large commercial bank. And we do have a few cases where we have VRDOs with outstanding bond insurance on them and a standby bond purchase agreement. Although due to the bond insurance sector downgrades that have occurred, as those facilities expire, we will likely migrate to a letter of credit approach on those transactions. We've discussed auction rate securities in the past. We have remaining about $860 million of bonds in auction rate mode that either reset weekly or monthly, 28-day or 35-day. Those auctions are failing, but they're failing at very low rates at the moment. And if you want to see what those rates are in the current mode, we put those in the committee book every month, and those auction rates appear on page 19 of the book, just for your reference. As the market begins to change and we see that that those bonds aren't delivering the low rates that we're seeing, we will have to put in place plans to address them at that time. Page 26 gives you a quick summary of the tax-exempt market conditions going back to 2005, and you see the volatility that occurred in late 2008 into 2009. And we've reported on this in the past. I don't think that we need to go over that any further, but that's the market we're in. Page 27, what we're talking about here is this $2.7 billion slice here of unhedged variable rate debt, currently at 10% of our portfolio. The synthetic fixed rate debt are those variable rate issues that have been swapped to fixed. We have term rate bonds, and then, of course, a large portfolio of traditional fixed rate bonds, 76%. The unhedged variable rate debt is broken out over 21 different agreements with 14 different bank providers, and we provide details on all that in the appendix of this report. Page 28 provides a summary by resolution of how the debt falls in all modes, fixed, synthetic fixed, variable, term rate, and notes. Again, on page 29, the diversification of the portfolio encompasses all those different products that are out there, the various maturities of auction rate bonds, 7, 28, and 35, commercial paper, transportation revenue commercial paper, daily VRDOs, and the bulk being weekly VRDOs, 66% in that mode. What important to note here, this pie chart encompasses both the hedged and unhedged, just so you can see how the whole portfolio falls together. Page 30 or 7 of the presentation gives you the past 15 months performance of our variable rate portfolio relative to our 4% budget on variable rates. And what you see here is that over the past 15 months, that portfolio has averaged at 0.96%, and you see the squiggly line showing how those rates actually fall between January 09 through the end of March. the savings that this that this portfolio has delivered continue to be very compelling and very strong. We've always presented to the committee a comparison of what this debt would have cost had we fixed it at the time of issue, and we used the bond buyer RBI, Revenue Bond Index, as a proxy, as a rough proxy. And so this is an estimate, but we think over the past 15-month period, the $29 million that we spent in interest costs and fees are pretty attractive relative to what the fixed rate coupon would have been at about $180 million. So those savings of $152 million stack up against our 09 presentation of $119 million. And we just show you this last quarter, there's about $32 million in savings on the portfolio. As I said, there's appendixes here. I won't go through these in detail, but there's a fair amount of presentation here of the numbers backing into all these calculations, what the fees cost, the average daily rate, the average financing cost with fees, the proxy fixed rate index, the savings, and we do this on a transaction-by-transaction basis. We also provide a summary of our remarketing assignments for those underwriters that have been awarded assignments in the portfolio. It's a lot of information, but I'm happy to take any questions if there's any questions on this.
Are you thinking of modifying the 4% budget for variable rate debt in light of current circumstances?
Well, it's something that we're going to look at as we get into the July financial plan cycle. I can't say at the moment whether or not we're going to adjust that, but that's something we're going to look at and speak to our new CFO about and determine how we want to approach that.
And there are some new variable rate, fixed rate products like SIFMA floaters and things that don't require letters of credit. Are we also going to be looking into those? Great. Finally, on the synthetic fixed rate debt, I think if we're showing the savings associated with variable rate debt, we should probably also, since this is a periodic report for the board, show the most current termination values for our interest rate swaps, which I know total over $300 million at this point if the music were to stop.
That's right. That's right. And those mark-to-market values are in the financial statements that will be reviewed by the
right. I know
committee.
they're in the financial statements, but that's about this thick, and
right.
This is a very nice summary. So maybe if we could see those reflected, that would be great.
What we could do is take that synopsis, do a summary on that, and Pat can present it that way.
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Next on the agenda are the action items. The first is the New York Power Authority Peak Load Management Agreement. We're seeking approval to enter an agreement to enroll MTA facilities in NYPA Peak Load Management Program. It's designed to improve the reliability of the electrical grid during peak hours. Pete Bass is here if you have any questions or if you'd like him to talk about it.
Would the committee like Pete to come up and just give us a real quick review, or is it not necessary? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Pete. Come on up down here, would you? I think it'll be easier for everybody to.
The New York Power Authority, which is our main provider of electricity, and the New York Independent System Operators and Con Ed collectively manage a bunch of peak load reduction programs. Generally, in the hottest months of the summer, when demand is highest, they'll pay their customers to shed load and maintain the integrity of the grid. So it's in our interest as customers who operate, but we also get paid to do it. Last year, we made about $600,000 participating in a variety of programs, and we are intending to participate this year, and we'll get the benefit of those payments as well. There's no downside to it. If we don't perform, we don't get paid, but there's no penalty involved. So it's risk-free in that sense. Any questions, I'd be glad to.
How do you lower your energy costs during peak load?
Well, for us, the major reduction is taking rectifiers offline in substations. We have a lot of redundancy in the system, and we're able to do that and maintain service. We also will lower lights, increase set points on HVAC in facilities, and that will save energy as well. We also have generators at 6 of our facilities that we turn on during one of these peak load events. The lion's share is the substations, though.
And you said that this was worth $600,000 to us last year?
Last year, yeah.
How much do we pay NYPA for energy in a year?
Well, it's about $350 million, depends, something like that. I think it's 320 last year.
We can't squeeze them harder than this?
I don't know. I'm not involved in negotiation.
I appreciate their charity and all, but it doesn't seem that they're making the ultimate effort here somehow.
Have we turned Mannheim loose on them?
Let's. I don't have any information on how they set their rates, and I'm not sure it's up to NYPA independently either. I think it's the system operators collectively. Well, we're the second biggest around here. City is, yeah. Port Authority, yeah. A few others.
I may be embarrassing myself with this question, but it won't be the first time. We're going to have 3 large bore tunnel machines going this summer, I believe. Do we have any sort of arrangements with Con Ed? Because I know they try to reduce utility usage during the summer peak periods, and how does all this play in?
They're not enrolled, I know that. I don't know if there are any plans to enroll those machines. I'm not sure we would. Honestly, I'm not sure if that would be in our interest. It would cost us a lot of money to stop work and pay guys.
No, I'm not suggesting we do that. I'm just wondering what our utility costs are going to be with 3 of those things going this summer.
Oh, I don't know. It's substantial. Yes, getting power down to those machines is a substantial challenge and a substantial cost. I couldn't say what it was, though.
Okay. So we have an action item, please. May we move it?
Second.
Okay. 1, move it. 2nd, please.
Second.
And a vote, please. All in favor?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
for obvious reasons, I need to recuse myself.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Would you please make a note of that?
Thank you.
So John, you could have explained this to us, right?
No.
Al?
I am interested, though, in a follow-up as to what we are doing about, since this is a substantial cost.
Okay, Doug, next item on our agenda.
Next is the 2009 Annual Investment Report. Our treasurer, Vinay Dayal, is here if you have any questions. That's also an action item.
Okay. Are there any questions on the investment report? Page 43 in our book.
That's right.
Let's just say. Okay, it's an action item, so we. Okay, and a second, please. And a vote, please. So moved. Okay.
Next item are headquarter procurements. We have 2 competitive procurements for HQ with a grand total amount of $1,537,000.
A second, please. And all in favor? So moved.
Next item from the Metro North and Long Island Committee. There are no Metro North items. Long Island Railroad has 2 competitive procurements with a grand total of $8,333,428.
A motion, please, and a second, please. All in favor? So moved.
Moving next to MTA bus operations. Well, there are 4 procurements, but I'm going to break it up a little bit. There's 2 non-competitive procurements, one for LI Bus in the amount of $115,000, and then one New York City Transit Bus in the amount of $167,100. Those are non-competitive procurements.
Okay, so we need a motion, please.
Okay, moving to competitive, we have
Oh, wait,
2.
we need a vote. You want a separate vote on
yes,
that, right?
yes, that's
Yeah,
correct.
okay, so we need a second, please. And all in favor? Okay, so that one's,
Sorry.
that's okay, Doug. Good, that's done.
2 competitive procurements, both New York City Transit Bus, totaling $5,140,273.
We need a motion, please. And a second, please. And a vote, please. So moved.
Next, we have bridges and tunnels. There are no items for bridges and tunnels.
Okay.
The next item is New York City Transit. We have a total of 6 procurements, 4 non-competitive and 2 competitive procurements, for a grand total of $145,839,701.
Motion, please. And a second, please. All in favor? So moved.
Okay.
Chair, I'm recused from item 2.
Okay, we have a note of that, please.
Okay. The next is FIMTech, and there are no items for FIMTech. That concludes the finance portion of this combined committee. I believe real estate would be up next.
Right. So just to bring everybody up to date, this is the first meeting of the Finance Committee where real estate falls under our purview, and I would ask Jeff Rosen to please come up. Now, I've asked Jeff to pretty much conduct the real estate portion of the meeting the way he has when it was under capital construction, and so I assume that he will follow the agenda and comment as he has in the past, Jeff. That's understood?
Yes.
Right, and anything that you want, since this is the first meeting, you kind of lead us along in what you want to do and what you need approval for, you let us know, okay?
Fine. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I look forward to working with this committee and giving good answers to questions. We have 10 items, action items, proposed action items we're asking for approval on today, several of which are routine. I could list them off in course, or just reference them in the book. Normally, we would just talk about a couple of specific items.
One action item to cover the whole agenda?
Yeah.
Or do you go through each one?
Yeah. Well, I think as we've discussed, I think we should have a very specific discussion about West Side Yards. But apart from that, I would
leave that on the side.
Apart from that, I would propose to handle the 9 items that are in the book together, if that's all right. Great. Of these items, I'd just like to highlight 3 items relating to Grand Central. We have 2 proposed 10-year leases. These are the first leases that we have awarded using our new guidelines, which we put in place in November. The board approved in November. We were happy with the way the guidelines worked. It happens that the awards in both cases are to incumbents. One is to Lilac Chocolate. The other is to O&Co. These are both food-related uses that support our concept for the marketplace, for the Grand Central Market. I did want to mention briefly that in the case of the O&Co lease, we had one non-complying bid from Sabon, and we were obliged to disqualify that bid because it was for a non-food related use. As I say, it's our judgment that it's more important to to foster a sort of consistent food-related theme in the Gray Bar Passage. That was our objective, and we hope that Sabon will respond as we have other opportunities become available. But their bid was slightly higher, about $100,000 in present value terms over the course of 10 years. But again, we in order to maintain the feel and the nature of Grand Central and to implement our plan for maximizing revenues for the terminal as a whole, we really have no choice but to go out with particular use specifications. One of the innovations in the new guidelines was that we made sure that we were going to be very clear about what was mandatory, what was permissive, what was prohibited, what was merely disfavored. We did that in this case. This was a mandatory use, and Sabon did not comply. This morning, the Metro North Committee approved proposed wireless, cellular, and Wi-Fi contract with a consortium of cellular carriers led by Verizon. This represents the culmination of a huge amount of work. Sorry? Yeah, it's all of them, and I think fundamentally the point of the business here is that they all want to be able to be in Grand Central and in the train shed to provide good service to their customers, and needed to be on board lest their competitors have an advantage. The license will provide guaranteed revenues of some $150,000 a year plus percentage of Wi-Fi revenues, but from the point of view of the railroad, the principal benefit is the in-kind payment of worth some $20 million for capital improvements that will specifically benefit the railroad and potentially New York City emergency personnel. It's a radio network for the use of the railroad. If anyone has more questions about that, Jerry Page can elaborate. Okay. Finally, I wanted to apprise you of a situation relating to 2nd Avenue subway. We have near the 96th Street station, there are some facades on some 100-plus-year-old tenements that have shown signs of being destabilized. The buildings are not in danger of structural collapse. They're not. But it's been determined that in order to protect these buildings and to prevent further harm to the facades as the work goes forward, that emergency repairs need to be made. This is going to proceed in 2 phases, the first of which can be done from the outside of the buildings and does not require any inconvenience to tenants, but regrettably there'll be a second phase that's needed that will entail potentially a couple of months of relocation of tenants to temporary hotel rooms. I believe Capital Construction has presented this matter separately in terms of their cost, but we have a budget of some $700,000 plus a contingency to get this done on our end, and we have in your package you have a resolution asking for a request for a resolution authorizing us to negotiate these arrangements with the owners and tenants of these buildings, failing which condemnation would be used to get this done. It needs to be done this summer in order to keep the work on track. Any questions about that? So I guess I'd ask for approval then of the 9 items that are in the book. Okay. Thanks. Now, sorry? Is that what he said? Okay.
I'm sorry, the West Side Yards, I'm sorry. Has everybody gotten the staff summary? So we've asked Jeff then to take us through the main points here and inform us as to what we're being asked to approve today.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm very pleased to be able to tell you that we're now ready to ask the board to take action to allow us to take a big step forward and execute definitive contracts for the disposition of the West Side Yard development rights. As you know, there are two yards, what we call the East Rail Yard and the West Rail Yard. They're separated by 11th Avenue. In December of 2009, the City Council took action to approve a rezoning of the West Rail Yard. This is a major milestone for us, allowing us to realize our full vision for the yards. Since then, as we announced early in the year, we've been working diligently to finalize our contracts with Related. Our negotiations have been guided at all times by the terms of the detailed conditional designation letters that were entered into in May of 2008. To give you some perspective, these are the conditional designation letters. They're as small as I could make them, but they're voluminous. They provide quite a lot of detail, and my point is that the deal has been largely baked for some while, and the process of coming up with definitive contracts that implement these arrangements has been complex, but it has been disciplined and guided at all times by these arrangements. We're here to ask for authority for three things. The first is for the board to make secret findings in conjunction with the rezoning and the disposition that we're planning, and given the changes in the West Rail Yards, it's been necessary to do an EIS. Those materials were distributed to you earlier in the month. I hope everyone's had a chance to look at them. At the same time, while we're here today, we're asking for ratification of some changes to the terms of the conditional designation letter that have been made since the board last took formal action in May of 2008. The basic structure and economics of the transaction remain unchanged, and they still reflect real estate values as they existed near the top of the market before the wheels came off the economy. Briefly, the structure is there are to be two contracts, one for each of the Eastern Rail Yard and the West. Each contemplates that the MTA will enter into a single 99-year ground lease with the developer, which can in turn be severed as the project proceeds into separate ground leases for separate parcels. We call these severance leases, to accommodate the separate ownership and financing and development of individual buildings and, to some extent, portions of very large mixed-use buildings, hotel, retail, office, etc. In each case, the basic economic proposition is that there was an initial land value was determined total for both yards at $870 million. 10% of that amount gets paid in lump sum payments and installments, half at closing, a quarter on the first anniversary of the closing, and another quarter on the second anniversary of the closing. And then rent is established under the ground leases at the rate of 6.5% of this initial land value, subject to various abatements, bumps, and resets, which are specified in the materials. Are quite complex. I can answer questions about that if you have them. The proposed changes from the terms of the May 2008 staff summary, the most significant of which were agreed to in January 2009 and described to the board at that time, are detailed in today's staff summary. Principally, they relate to the timing of the closing, or the closings, I should say, under each contract, and the deposits that are to be made and held in escrow under those contracts in the meanwhile. Previously, in essence, the deal was that 5% of this initial land value, that is to say, about $43 million for both contracts, would be paid at contract, followed in short order by the closing. In light of the extreme downturn in the market, and I should say really, in effect, the disappearance of the market, the agreement that was made was that the 5% down payment, if you will, would be paid 2.5% at closing. I beg your pardon, a contract, that is to say $21.7 million a contract, 1.25% 6 months after that, and 1.25% 12 months after that. So by a year from now, if we sign the contracts this month, we will have the full $43 million in escrow, under deposit. Those amounts get released at closing. As before, the second major change that was set out in the January 2009 extension to the CDL has to do with the timing of the closing. The parties have devised a set of triggers, of some 3 triggers relating to residential condominium pricing, office availability, and architectural billings, which is a proxy for construction activity, that are designed to stand as signals, if you will, of a return to normalcy of the market. They aren't designed to signal the top of the market, but to evidence that it's time for people who are serious about development to move forward. The agreement is that that when those 3 triggers are set, at the very latest, Related will be obligated to close. We would expect them, in fact, to be motivated and to desire to close before then. And in any case, importantly, we've reserved the right to terminate at any time whether or not the triggers have been triggered on 90 days' notice, at which point Related would either have to close or forfeit some or all of their deposit. They would forfeit $10 million of their deposit if we were to take that action at any time after January 1 of 2011, and none of it if we were to do it this year. Those are, in a nutshell, the most significant changes since the May 2008 board action. I'd be happy to take questions about that. Maybe that would be the most efficient thing, and then I can move on to the...
But I noticed that the chairman's joined us, and I wonder, Jay, if you wanted to make a comment, or should we just proceed with board questions? Okay. So then, any board members would like to ask Jeff any questions about his report? Mark?
Can I just ask procedurally, are you looking to have this committee vote on this proposal today? Or are you looking to have the board act on Wednesday, or both?
The idea was that we would vote to move this to the full board for their agenda on Wednesday.
I guess I'm in some difficulty, having received this memo yesterday afternoon and having a few other things that I was trying to do at the same time. I don't feel terribly comfortable in terms of, I don't know of any problems with it, but I don't feel terribly comfortable with being obliged to vote this afternoon, quite honestly.
We apologize for the timing. We were reluctant to send a staff summary before we were sure there wasn't going to be
sure what should be in it, and I'm totally sympathetic. It's just I've been jammed.
Fair enough.
And it just if when I and my staff actually have a chance to read it, we come up with something, I don't really want to be in a position of having voted for it today and then having some issue to discuss with you between now and Wednesday.
Are the zoning issues resolved with this property?
Yes.
They're all?
Yes.
Yeah, the Western Rail Yard was rezoned by City Council resolution in December of 2009. There was a lengthy process that went on over the last year of environmental assessment as well as the ULURP process, and that resulted in the rezoning. And what we need to conclude for the West Rail Yard is one of the action items that we're hoping the board will act on Wednesday is the adoption of the finding statement for that environmental assessment for the West Rail Yard.
So the contingencies here are really just the marketplace? It's no longer a zoning contingency?
Right. There's no longer a zoning contingency. The zoning for the West Rail Yard provides for mixed-use development at 10 FAR. We understand the shortness of time and the members' opportunity to review the staff summary, and we certainly will make ourselves available to answer any questions, whether now or obviously in the next couple of days, if that's the direction of the chair and the committee, given the shortness of time.
I'd just like to repeat, it's, and on my part, it's not because I have any objection that I know about at this moment.
Carl, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah. What is the actual total dollar value we're going to receive when this deal is done?
Well, the payments are to be made over time under a lease. I mentioned lump sum payments that are to be made at closing and within 2 years of closing. They total some.
What are we going to
$87
realize
million.
out of the whole thing in the end, is what I'm getting at.
Right.
And when is the end?
Right. Well, that answer is somewhat complicated, but I'll try to give you a relatively short answer. The transaction has been set up as a series of leases. Those leases contain purchase options. It's very likely that the developer will exercise those purchase options as buildings are completed, both because it's, an aid to financing to have fee ownership, and because in the case of residential projects where there are condominiums or where there are residential leaseholds in mixed-use buildings that entail a condominialization of the building, it's a matter of law. They can't have a leasehold condominium. They have to buy those.
So I understand that. But
so we've had pro forma analysis, and this dates back to, the initial award back in 2008 of the projected lease streams, including all of the escalations that are called for in the document, then with some pro forma assumptions about when those purchase options are exercised, and the number is just north of $1 billion for both yards on a present value basis using a 6% discount rate.
And that would be over a period of, could be 5 years, 10 years?
Well, that's as I say, that's the present value. As it's a 99-year lease. There are some abatements that are provided for in terms of the rent. So apart from those initial $87 million lump sum payments, the rental stream does not start as a gush. It starts as a trickle, and then it opens up to a fuller amount within some 5 years. The closings under the two agreements are staggered, so that also enters into it. The West Rail Yard would be a year after the East Rail Yard, or as much as a year after.
And then as these leases are, as they're closing on different parts of this project, we'll realize money from that, as a sale would take place for a condominium or for an office building or whatever's going to be built.
There's no percentage rent or participation if that's what you mean, but those events would affect the timing of the payments to some extent. But fundamentally, the way the transaction has been structured, the point is to make us within a fairly narrow band indifferent to the timing of the development, because they have rent to pay under the leases regardless.
So this whole thing is just north of $1 billion.
That's correct.
And
on a present value basis.
You should realize that within probably 5 years as it's being built. Is that how it's? Or it's going to be more than that?
No, I think it's more than that. I don't think we're in a position to say that in effect in 5 years we will have $1 billion. No.
Could be 10.
Just it depends on a lot of variables.
Could be.
Could be.
Okay.
I mean, much of the timing of the return depends upon these are 99-year leases, so I don't think anyone expects them to actually endure for 99 years, because the likelihood is that the developer would take out and make purchases, at which time there's a payment made that's based upon the acceleration of the payment of the present value of the lease payments that would remain on that parcel. So the timing of the return depends upon the timing of those purchases.
But
I want to emphasize, though, that those economics of the leases are the same as they were when we were before you in May of 2008, after we had the very competitive request for proposals process involving, a number of the leading developers who'd all, been interested and sought to get disposition rights here, and that was the pricing that was determined as a result of that competitive process and those negotiations back then. We haven't fundamentally changed that in any way.
there's no other comments, what I suggest we...
Excuse me, Andrew,
yeah.
we did want to talk about the other element to this, the city piece. Right. In the course of doing the detailed title investigation that the developer needed to do in the run-up to developing the contracts and listing what would be permitted exceptions to title, it was discovered that in 1983, when Triborough acquired the East Rail Yard from the city reserved ownership of air rights above 32nd Street. And, I mean, this was unknown to all concerned, but it needed to be addressed. I think it's fair to say that if back at the time of the original arrangements between the city and Triborough, if this had been understood, there would have been, it would have needed to be addressed then. So I'm going to ask Jerry to describe the proposed resolution of that problem.
Okay. It's a little bit complicated. I'll try to keep it simple, but going back 30 years, in 1980 and 81, it was determined that the West Side yards would go forward, and the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority was the agency that was used to assemble the property. And they bought the eastern and western rail yards from the old railroad companies that owned it, the Penn Central and the Penn Tunnel and a terminal company and some of their affiliates. And then in 1983, TBTA bought the 32nd Street rights from the city on the Eastern Rail Yard. Move ahead to 2006, and we entered into, the MTA and the city entered into a memorandum of agreement whereby the city agreed to advance MTA $200 million for Eastern Rail Yard transferable development rights. When the Eastern Rail Yard was rezoned in 2005, there were a component of density that was available to be built on site and a component of density that is available to be transferred to other receiving sites in the Hudson Yards development area. And so the city has actually paid us those $200 million in advance, and to get their money back, they have the right to sell these Eastern Rail Yard transferable development rights to the entities that are going to be developing in this high-density Hudson Yards area. And at the time, the expectation was that the market was red hot and they would be able to sell those relatively quickly. But we agreed that the city would sell at a minimum price that's set forth by reference to zoning, which was $103 a square foot, and that's escalated every year. The city has not yet, because of the downturn in the market, sold any of those air rights. Moved to 2007, there was another MOU with the city, and in one component of that was that the city asked MTA to reserve 200,000 square feet of density, again on the Eastern Rail Yard, for the city to make an arrangement for a cultural facility. At the time, the city agreed to pay MTA $15 million when the closing happens on the Eastern Rail Yard. And that arrangement also had the right, if the city didn't end up using that space for the Eastern Rail Yard, for the cultural facility on the Eastern Rail Yard, they could return it to MTA, and we owed back the $15 million that had been paid to us. So we move again forward to 2009 and the title report that Jeff referred to, which indicated, unbeknownst to the city, Long Island Railroad, MTA, that when MTA, well, it was Triborough, but when Triborough bought the 32nd Street rights on the Eastern Rail Yard, there actually was a limiting plane created, and it's at about 30 feet, 40 feet above. It's an inclined plane, but above the track of the yard. And above that plane, the city retained the air rights. and Triborough owns below that limiting plane, and that was part of the western rail yards. 32nd Street was demolished, taken out. The rail yard sits in part on that 32nd Street. As I said, the city agreed to pay MTA $15 million at the Eastern Rail Yard closing. We have to deal with the city ownership of the air rights over 32nd Street because they're right in the middle of the development site. They comprise about 400,000 square feet of the zoning floor area density. So we've worked out an arrangement with the city to address that, whereby the city's going to transfer to us the 32nd Street parcel. They're also, because of the definition of the planning of the cultural facility, going to reduce the reserved airspace for the cultural facility down from 200,000 to 100,000 feet. So we're reserving half as much, and we get MTA gets the remaining 100,000 square feet. And in return, MTA is going to agree to forego the $15 million. Obviously, this is all subject to board approval, but under the deal, MTA would forego the $15 million payment, essentially getting the air rights and these 100,000 square feet of cultural facility space as satisfaction of the city's obligation to make payment. And we would also agree to extend for a period of 7 years that pricing arrangement that I talked about with respect to the Eastern Rail Yard transferable development rights, that for an additional 7 years, the city got 7 years of rights to sell at no less than this zoning referenced minimum. We would extend that by another 7 years, and that from a staff level was thought to be a good trade. It's hard to value the city's the parcel that the city retains, but using measurements that we think are legitimate, it's a very significant real estate interest, and putting aside obviously that from a hold-up value it would be very detrimental to our project, but obviously we're a partnership with the city, and we think we have a good resolution.
Okay. Any questions on that?
I have a prior question, Mr. Chairman. The related companies are not a publicly traded company, and we are going to be accepting in lieu of cash or an LC a promissory note from them. How will we be able to ascertain whether their financial condition has materially changed? Will they be sharing fully their financials with this agency?
They're in the process of finalizing their 2009 audited statements, and we expect to have them very shortly. PricewaterhouseCoopers was retained by the MTA to analyze their 2008 statements and other materials, and so we believe we have a picture of their financial condition as it existed a year ago. In addition, they report on a historical cost basis, so there's an exercise they go through to ascertain fair value for their real estate assets in accordance with GAAP, which I believe E-Still is helping them with, and we expect to have that very shortly as well. But I will say, Doreen, that they're
very substantial company. I know that.
Company. And beyond that, as you know, we have insisted that we receive collateral satisfactory to us.
And the collateral hopefully will be in the form of marketable securities versus a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
That hasn't been determined. That's up to them to come forward with something that will satisfy us in our reasonable discretion. It may be a real estate interest. It may be some other form of collateral. It will depend, what they have at the time that they can can encumber without interfering with their plans for their orderly business.
You're going to be looking at this very carefully, I assume.
Yes.
Just to echo something Mark said, poor Jim Henley got the extent of my displeasure about getting this packet at 3:30 yesterday. May of 2008 was a very long time ago for us to remember the details of a very complicated transaction, and whether 5 terms change or 55 terms change, I really feel in these big developer deals that we get the bum's rush in figuring out how to vote on these things. So I know you've worked very, very long and hard up until the very last moment to get the best deal possible, but it's a little frustrating.
You know what I think we should do, in lieu of what you said, Doreen, and what Mark said, is why don't we vote to send this on to the board with the understanding that if anybody over the next 2 days, when they read this thing, has any concern or any questions about it, that it will be brought up at that time and their vote is not binding, in the final vote. So in other words, what Mark said, that if he votes to send this on to the board meeting and then he has concerns and brings up an issue later on, that he will not be voting once yes and once no, with that understanding. Because I think it was done, I agree with you, it's complicated, everybody just got it. I think in the past there has been a bum's rush, and I would agree with Doreen. I don't think that's the way we run business here right now, in my opinion, but that has happened in the past. So why don't we, if it's okay with you, Jim, send it to the board with that understanding?
That would be fine, of course, and we are sorry that there wasn't more time made available to board members for these materials. In the pace of the negotiations and the fluidity, turned out, as Jeff has indicated, that we couldn't send materials to you until we thought that they fairly reflected the status of the negotiation. The negotiation had been advanced to the stage where it would be appropriate to do so. So under the circumstances, we certainly understand your frustration. I do want to emphasize that the core of the deal has remained the same, and that we've tried to focus, on the changes that we thought were significant, and that on those changes we've tried to brief the board contemporaneously with their occurrence. But it has been a substantial period of time, so I certainly understand the concerns, and we make ourselves available to answer any questions.
Just as a technical matter, I know that there are certain plans in one thing or another that I'm not that have been voted upon by the full board. I'm under the impression without being voted on by a committee on the way to the board. Am I wrong? Is procedurally, is it necessary for this committee to vote in order to get this matter before the board on Wednesday?
Procedurally, no. You're correct. There are certainly circumstances where matters have come to the full board directly without going through committee.
I would be more comfortable with that.
Alan?
Move to send it to the full board without recommendation.
Seconded.
Jim, what's your opinion? I mean, what do you feel should be done here? With the concerns that some of the number of board members have made, how do you feel it should be done?
That's fine. We're
I didn't mean to jump in here because I just get really conceited, but I have to tell you that I spoke to these gentlemen and Bob Kelly several times over the weekend. Everybody worked to the end to do it, and actually I very much made the decision. I thought it was important to get it to the board this month. I don't think there's any intent, so I think your suggestion as a way to do it is fine, and if there's further questions and further discussion, we'd like to use the next 48 hours to make sure that everybody is comfortable with this. It's a complicated transaction, it's an important transaction, and we need as a board to be comfortable with it.
Okay, so we will send it on to the board without actually having official vote. Okay?
On the table is to send it without a recommendation, which is, I think, substantively much what you just said.
Right, correct.
But does technically, I think, have a vote in it.
All
So
right,
I
does
think we have a
everybody
motion
understand that?
and
We're going to
this-
send it on to the board without an official vote, official recommendation.
No, two different things, without a recommendation, but with a vote to send it on without a recommendation. I'm splitting hairs, I'm afraid, but I think
Jim,
that's where we're
would you
at.
please, you make this, you do it, okay? I'm screwing up. You go ahead.
I understand the committee has made a motion to advance the action items concerning the West Side Yards to the full board for the board's action without the committee having made any recommendation one way or the other.
Seconded.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Jeff, thank you. Is there anything, before we leave, is there anything else on real estate?
No, I think I'm fine.
Thank you. Thanks. Good first meeting. Okay, a motion to adjourn the Finance Committee meeting. And all in favor?
So, by the way, you'll hear me.
This is why we're paying the big bucks, okay? I want to see